Okay, everyone, my name is Max Gardner, and today I will be arguing that drug addiction is a disease and not a choice. And when I say drugs, I'm referring to illegal substances. So why is this relevant? Many people in their lifetime will experiment with illegal drugs, but only a certain amount will become dependent. So why is that? Many people have a misconception that those who use drugs lack moral principles or willpower, and that they could simply stop by just stopping. But in reality, addiction is a very complex disease, and quitting usually takes more than just good intentions or a strong will. There's no set of rules that dictate if someone will develop an addiction, but there's a strong correlation between certain elements of a lifestyle and substance abuse. So experts believe in either one of two things when it comes to addiction. They either believe in choice theory, and according to the William Glasser Institute, that states that all we do is behave and all behavior is chosen. And other experts believe that drug addiction is a disease that is caused by various environmental factors, and it alters the brain chemistry in a negative fashion, and it is progressive. So addiction is caused by various environmental factors. So the way that one was raised will shape their disposition towards drugs. For example, you have various risk factors versus protective factors. So you have lack of parental supervision versus parental monitoring. You have community poverty versus community unity. You have availability of drugs versus anti-drug policies. Poor social skills versus positive relationships. And the list goes on and on and on, but in general, these risk factors shape your access and your exposure to drugs. So these things really aren't up to you, it's just kind of how you're brought up. And environmental factors will play a role into any diagnosis of any disease. For example, if your family does not eat healthy or exercise regularly, then you will be at greater risk to heart disease. And the same can be said about addiction if your family uses. Secondly, once the brain has been altered by a substance, the choice or will to stop will become impaired. So during adolescence, the brain is still developing abilities to handle emotions, make proper judgments, essentially decision making. And exposure to drugs at this age will cause irreversible consequences to the brain. So according to the Green Facts on Health and Environment, ingestible substances release the same chemicals which grant you pleasure, gratification, and natural highs. So unnecessary amounts of substances cause permanent changes within the brain relating to reward, motivation, and memory. So essentially, when you feel pleasure of something, that pleasure is a result of these chemicals in your brain called serotonin and dopamine. And these are natural chemicals. Like if you get up on a surfboard, having sex, like things like that, release these natural highs for you. And when you ingest a substance, this is essentially the reward center of your brain. And when you ingest a substance, the high that you feel is a result of these unnatural added serotonin and dopamine levels. So this means that the reward section of your brain is flooded with unorganic results, and this causes people to lack fulfillment and pleasure in basic natural commodities of life. So they're replacing it with unnatural substances. And over time, the brain will adjust and reduce its dopamine levels, and this will affect the tolerance, which means that more and more of the substance is required to feel the same high. And this is where individuals will lack their choice, because at this point, the urge becomes necessary. The urge to use becomes necessary, and the body is physically dependent on the substance. So there's no longer a choice to stop, and an individual must indulge in order to feel normal. People who struggle with substance abuse feel in control when they use, and non-addicts feel out of control when they use. Finally, addiction is a progressive disease. So the definition of a disease is a disorder of function in human, animal, or plant, especially one that produces specific signs or symptoms. So what I mean by progressive is that it is a relapsing disease. It requires intensive treatment, continual care, constant support. And it is manageable, it is treatable, but this inherently fits into this description of what a disease is. It needs to be treated. There is no arrival, there is no set cure or day when you say, I have beat my addiction, it is gone now. It is a constant battle, a continual battle, a conscious effort against the substance. So at this point, if an individual wanted to stop using, then he or she would do so in an instant. But it is truly not that simple, and the mental illness of an addiction is a tough competitor to overcome because one must completely relearn and rewire their brain in order to be satisfied with the natural commodities of life. So to use for the first time might be a choice, yes, but nearly every human has tried it. So why do some become addicted while others do not? Because of all these reasons I've told you. Thank you.
You're scheduled to speak tonight, right?
Yeah.
You got your evaluation rubric that goes along with this?
Sorry, what?
This form that I'm writing on right now, that I distributed last week?
That I did last week, yeah.
Yeah. I need that to go with this.
These two.
And that's a peer evaluation also. Okay. So that goes there. That goes someplace completely different. Where did we run out of people? Oh, you need one?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. No. I'd say ladies first, but that would be sexist and diminishing your power, so we don't want to do that. We'll just say you were first in the queue. All right. Torsten, you filled out this form. This is what I fill out. Where I know you just walked by. This is what I fill out. So I'm going to write on top of all this stuff because you weren't supposed to fill this out.
My bad.
That's okay. But I suddenly now, she's going to say, I already spoke when I called her name. Now, what was I doing? Oh, Max just finished speaking. That's what I was doing. I was going to talk about his presentation. All right. The proposition's clear. You do a little bit to suggest that there's a controversy by suggesting that there are two schools of thought. You have a quote actually on the first one talking about choice theory. The disease theory, there isn't really any citation given in that opening section to suggest that competes with this other idea, although that's the whole body of your speech. So I guess that's okay to save it for that particular point. So like I said, I think there's a little bit of development of a controversy here. I do think it could be a little bit stronger. There's no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, and that's problematic. There's a lot of explanation about what it constitutes, drug addiction, and then you've got, like you mentioned yourself, an endless list of concepts that could influence this from an environmental perspective. I get the impression that this is all part of the first point, but the exact label on that claim is not very clear. The second point, you do have a numerical signpost for, so I know what's going on there and how it is supposed to fit in here. Again, there's an explanation about serotonin and dopamine and how the brain gets flooded with all of these sorts of things. And again, there's no source citation on this information. I'm sure that you did some research, but the research is not being included in the explanations here. And a lot of this does sound like explanation rather than argument, since you basically said in the first part, you talked about what the choice theory was. There's not really any further discussion of that choice theory and why it isn't particularly relevant. All you do is explain how these other factors could influence people's brain, and then the assumption is that once the brain's been influenced, choice is left out of it. And I think that that's a big inferential leap that you're making that you need to develop some more data on. And then that's on your third point, you're talking about what constitutes a disease and addiction. And again, it sounds like it's one of those 12-step issues. There's not an arrival date where you say I am cured or I don't have this anymore. It's a continuing process, but I'm not exactly sure that you've documented that the same way that you documented or tried to explain the other points. There's no statistical information in the presentation. There are a couple of places where there's some testimony information. You've got what I assume is a whole bunch of factual data that doesn't get sources, so that's a little bit problematic, and I think that's a little bit probably the weak area in the speech is the lack of citation on the information. I thought that you did a nice job trying to speak to the audience for the most part. And once again, I do think it does sound a little bit more like an informative than an argument at times. All right, thank you.